can we start with... my name is Sithathu, convener of IBF. I'll be moderating this panel. Where are the artists? I don't see them here, and they are the ones who cry foul when they die as paupers. But this is where they should be, because of this is where the information is. This is what drives the royalty flow, and unfortunately, they don't access this information, and no wonder there's a deficit in information, especially in our sector. So, without further ado, I think let's start. But I want to make this as interactive as possible as well, so that we can, I know we're at Wits, a varsity's lecture student. I don't want a lecture student kind of a relationship. I think that's why I dropped out from Wits, but I'm back again. So yeah, I want us to look at for starters, to look at the critical elements, especially the questions that those that are opposed to the bill, they raise, the questions about the bill. And I want us to focus on those areas they say is going to impoverish artists. Shaun, sorry. And when it comes to Shaun and photography, I think I want to focus on his story. Because of, I know he's gonna say it's sub judice. What do you say? It's in court process, so we can't talk about it. Sub judice. So, but maybe you can just give us some pointers there, because I like dealing about practical issues that people are faced with. And now that we've demystified some of the provisions like fair use that people make a whole lot of noise about, and including lawyers and attorneys, they actually misinterpret fair use, what's interesting, so that they can push their own view and point. Mr. Christo de Klerk, you're the only de Klerk I love, and the one from the rugby. so because of it, you just put it clear to say the president should sign the bills. But yes, I'm a moderator, but I have a point of view. Even lawyers and judges have a point of view. They can sit there. Nobody's ever neutral. So I'm not going to pretend as if I'm neutral. I am a proponent that the president should sign the bills because of we are better than the status quo. So starting with reversion right. The 25-year, there's this provision in the bill that the music industry in particular is complaining about the fact that when I'm a performer, I sign a contract, after 25 years, the company should give me my rights back. So it beats me. I actually never understand artists who actually fight against that. Because of intellectual property law, once somebody owns your rights, they own them for life. So I don't know. You wanna cast some light onto that, and maybe I read it differently because of I hear a lot of producers, particularly recording companies in South Africa, are complaining about that. To say no, but we don't want that.
Well, I've prepared a presentation on performers' rights, performers' rights to royalties, but I can touch on that reversion right.
Okay, that's fine. Maybe what we should
afterwards.
Do, afterwards, maybe let's start with the presentation. So I didn't know you've prepared a presentation. Let's start with the presentation so that it can help the House to be able to get all the information even before we start into the discussion. Can we begin with you?
Thank you. My name is Adrian Galley. I'm the Vice Chair of the South African Guild of Actors. Now, I like to consider myself an entertainer, as we are part of the entertainment industry, but I'd like to just refer to the two meanings of to entertain that are given in the dictionary. One is to provide someone with amusement or enjoyment, which is what I hope we do, but I do believe that the second definition of to entertain is not mutually exclusive to that particular one, and that is to give attention or consideration to an idea or feeling. So entertainers have a role to play in society, and we're part of the cultural economy, but more on that later, and the knowledge economy. Now, just this past Friday, the 29th of November, the SABC finally confirmed the rumors that have been circulating. It announced that the long-running daily drama Isidingo is to be shut down. The broadcaster rationalised, of course, that a decline in revenue no longer represented a favourable return on investment, and the channel's strategic direction lay elsewhere. A number of actors whose faces are indelibly linked to that series will be spending the coming holiday season considering strategies to secure their own financial futures, which have unexpectedly become very precarious and uncertain. Now, there will be no new episodes created, but the intellectual property will no doubt continue to be exploited in those global territories where Isidingo remains popular. Kenya, Nigeria, the rest of Africa, Argentina, and elsewhere in South America, the global south basically. And let's not forget the Encore channel on MultiChoice, and thereby hangs another tale. After 21 seasons of Isidingo, 5,500 episodes are in the can, in fact, in excess of that. And the rights holders will continue to see a return on their investment, but not one of the 75 or more principal actors who were part of those 5,500 episodes is entitled by law to a share of revenue by way of a performer's royalty. Now, musicians, which you mentioned, have enjoyed a statutory right to performance royalties for more than 50 years, thanks to the Performers Protection Act No. 11 of 1967, which granted protection of the economic rights of performers in phonograms, defined as an exclusively oral fixation. Now, that's the narrowest of definitions. It, of course, excludes future technological innovations. But as night follows day, the future began to happen the very next decade when television arrived on our shores, and the rights of performers in audiovisual media, actors, were left completely unprotected. The march of time is relentless, and the future has continued to happen with the development of VCR technology, the advent of the internet, and the digital age that has heralded an explosion in the variety of platforms through which recorded or fixed audiovisual performances could be exploited. So we cut to the present. The South African Guild of Actors was very welcomed the opportunity to become engaged with the process of copyright reform. We made numerous submissions to the parliamentary presentations on both the Copyright Amendment Bill and the Performers Protection Amendment Bill. As the bills progressed through the various drafts and were passed through the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces, actors became increasingly hopeful that for the first time ever, they would have a chance to derive some form of annuity income by way of performance royalties. We hear continually how actors end up dying as paupers. And this is one of the reasons there is no form of annuity income for actors. Now, even the most vocal opponents of the Copyright Amendment Bill agree that the Performers Protection Amendment Bill is long overdue. Some of them are suggesting that the PPAB should be enacted while the CAB goes back to the drawing board. In other words, they want to split the bills. So I'm not here to split hairs over the relative merits and demerits of the Copyright Amendment Bill. There are people far more poised to do that in this room. I'm here to dispel any suggestion that the Performers Protection Bill can be separated from the Copyright Amendment Bill, and to assert that any attempt to suggest that they can be separated is just a disguised argument for both to be radically rewritten or delayed in perpetuity. Now, in short, the Performance Protection Bill cannot be put into effect unless the Copyright Amendment Bill is also in effect. There are both structural reliances and textual entanglements that underpin the relationship between the two bills, and I'll just run through a few of them briefly. The new rights granted to audiovisual performers, actors, require that a collective management organization is established and effectively regulated. That's to collect all of those royalties globally through reciprocal arrangements with other collective management organizations and manage that income and distribute it to the performers concerned. Now, the provisions for the effective regulation of collective management organizations lies in the Copyright Amendment Bill. So the rights granted to actors under the Performance Protection Amendment Bill would be meaningless in the absence of the Copyright Amendment Bill also coming into effect. The Performance Protection Amendment Bill contains no exceptions for disabled persons. So as a result of that, it is unconstitutional, or it would be if it was enacted by itself. However, the bill does contain an amendment to the Principal Act with the introduction of Section 82F, which allows exceptions for, quote, purposes which are regarded as exceptions in terms of the Copyright Act. Now, the Copyright Act to which that refers, if the Copyright Amendment Bill doesn't go through, is already unconstitutional because there are no provisions for people with disabilities. So the Performance Protection Amendment Bill requires the Copyright Amendment Bill to go through in order that it is constitutional. The Copyright Amendment Bill, as I mentioned, the current Copyright Act is unconstitutional because there are no provisions for people with disabilities, but the Amendment Bill has Section 19D, which provides for general exceptions regarding protection of copyright work for persons with disabilities. So that then renders them both constitutional. The Performance Protection Amendment Bill also refers disputes about royalties to the Copyright Tribunal, which is regulated by the Copyright Act. Now, Section 30 of the current Copyright Act only makes provision for, or gives the tribunal powers to adjudicate licensing disputes. The Copyright Amendment Bill gives the tribunal the power to adjudicate disputes over performers' royalties. Section 29A, subsection E, provides that the tribunal may settle disputes relating to licensing schemes, which it does already, payment of royalties, or terms of agreement entered into as required by this Act, or agreements entered into in order to regulate any other matters in relation to copyright. So, the Performance Protection Amendment Bill will only really be effective once that Copyright Amendment Bill is also in effect. The Performance Protection Bill also relies on definitions and provisions in the CAB with regard to copyright management information and technological protection measures. There are four whole sections of the Performance Protection Amendment Bill that will be rendered absolutely void if the definitions that are contained in the Copyright Amendment Bill are not in effect. So the PPAB makes direct references to the Copyright Act for definitions of copyright management information, technologically protected work, technological protection measures, and technological protection measures circumvention devices. Now, none of these currently appear in the Copyright Act, but they are in the Copyright Amendment Bill and will be given effect in that regard. The PPAB also makes reference to cinematographic, or deletes references to cinematographic films, replacing them with reference to audio-visual fixations. Well, that's the future happening right before us. The current Copyright Act still refers to cinematographic films. Now, combined with the competing interpretations of what constitutes a sound recording, the two terms, cinematographic film and audiovisual fixation, are mutually unintelligible. So those two bills need to both be enacted in order to make sense of it. And then there are a few more, like the PPAB amends Section 5, so that Section 5.5 refers to Section 8A of the Copyright Act. Well, the current Copyright Act has no such section. It refers to the amendment that is contained in the Copyright Amendment Bill. In a similar vein, but with an added little complication, which dramatists enjoy, actors such as myself enjoy little twists like this, there's the PPAB amends Section 5, so that 5.5 refers to Section 9A of the Copyright Act. Well, there is a Section 9A of the Copyright Act, but It is in fact replaced entirely by a provision in the new copyright provision of the Copyright Amendment Bill. So if the Copyright Amendment Bill is not enacted, then the reference to 9A in the Performance Protection Amendment Bill refers completely to the wrong provision. In summary, the PPAB consists of 11 sections. 6 of those 11 sections rely on the Copyright Amendment Bill. Now, the Performance Protection Act is outdated by more than half a century. Many of our veteran actors rely on charity to cover their basic necessities. The resources of the likes of the Theatre Benevolent Fund, perhaps mercifully, do not extend to a DSTV subscription, where they might be exposed to reruns of their lifetime's work as they contemplate where their next meal is coming from. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. And sorry, my apologies, I should have introduced you.
Oh, no problem at all.
Okay, all right. I know Adrian's organization very well because I work a lot with your chairperson, Jack, who's an actor, who's been such a great activist.
Jack Devnarain,
Jack
I'm sure many of you would know
yeah,
him.
from Isdingo, Rajesh.
When we were in Parliament, he'd already not been part of Isdingo for about 2 years, but he was referred to by his character's name.
Rajesh.
Now, this is
Rajesh.
how indelibly associated with a particular character an actor becomes.
Yeah.
So that while that intellectual property is being exploited further and they have no share in it, their opportunities are limited by the fact that he is Rajesh.
Yeah. No, no, thank you. Thanks. Shaun, I'm not sure, do you have a presentation? Thank you so much for the good insights. Do you want to do a presentation, then we can come into the discussion. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I was looking at the time because it was supposed to have been morning, but good afternoon. Shaun Harris, who is representing SAFREA, which is Southern African Freelancers Association. I am the membership coordinator for the national body and the copyright adjudicator or director under the whole of the association to see how the creators and more importantly the photographers can look at the best way that the amendment, the Copyright Amendment Bill will affect us, even though that it has been written and it is going into the last stages. We as creators and photographers have one or two points within it that we would like to bring to the attention, as in how to address these. The first one that we are looking at, as in the photographers, would be the point of 21.1c of the current Copyright Act, which is the ownership and or the authorship of the images or the work that a photographer takes. If we are commissioned, or if the person is commissioned from an outside source to go and take a image or take a multimedia compilation, the commissioner in the past under the Act is the owner and the author of, the owner of the copyright of that creation. The photographer or the person who takes it would only get remunerated once. And one of the biggest drawbacks of the past is how the work has been reproduced, replicated continuously, not only within the South African market, and I'm talking about in the early 94s when I came here. Now within the digital age, it's easier for the news agencies or the commissioner who had commissioned the work to distribute the creative medium worldwide. And again, the artists who partook in the capturing of that digital material has only been paid or paid once in that manner. It is good to see now that within the Act, yes, there is amendments in there, basically on the resale of the work of a creative. So the commissioner or the commissioning body would only get that, and I say that to a certain amount of time, royalties once. Again, if it comes under the CMOs, which is the collection monitoring organizations, who would, and as within the Act, it explains that the CMOs would be set up, who would help monitor all sales and resales of an artist's work. But once again, the drawback on that is that experience has shown that even though there are a minimal number of CMOs within South Africa, the governing body or the governing body under South Africa, under CIPC, is having difficulty to monitor, and I'm talking about SAMRO on one side, who is authorized or mandated to collect the royalties for the performance or the music artists, and how, again, is that going to come out and materialize under the same mandate as in the visual artists. Because if SAMRO at present is having great difficulty in recovering the royalties for the performers, how is it going to affect the other visual artists out there? We're talking about photographers, digital capturers of videos, and the other artists and creators that we may have out there who have been commissioned. And then the government has said that all commissioned work will be managed by a CMO, a collection monitoring organization that would distribute your royalties into the future. The drawback on that, once again, is, as we have experienced, that the creative, the individual who is bringing the work straight forward, normally he would get paid and then the royalties would follow on. Here, again, because of the, we're looking at the bureaucracy of the system, how, again, would the artist get remunerated equally and in the proper manner? That is the number one point of contention. I would say that the freelance, and I put on this hat of the photographers, more importantly than the other creatives or creatives within the Southern African Freelance Association, has to or has contention with. The other points I would like to bring up was the one on orphan works, excuse me. The problem here, once again, is, as the experience has shown, is that once the user or user of work out there, if it has no name on, if it has not been identified or bylined, they are saying that it's orphaned work and it is freely available or freely to be used. What would happen into the future, and again, once the author or the owner of that orphaned work has been found, has been located, will the CMO go back into the archives, look at the sale or the royalties due to that individual? Or again, will, and as the government is asking or requesting, that they will mandate, they will govern all orphan works. So all the revenue that has been made from the sale and the distribution of somebody's creative work is sitting in a let's call it the slush fund, into one side, where only once the art author or any of those owners of that copyrighted work has said that this is my work, or this is my, or I am the owner of the rights of this, only then will they get recompensated. Now, we're asking for a quicker way, and again, that no orphaned work should be used unless the author or the copyright holder has been located. And all stops and ways to locate the creator of those works have been located. The other one point, which would be number section 5, is under state funding. Because once the state or the international organization has funded or partly funded, even to a fraction of a production or a production going into play, that the state owns the rights of the whole production going forward, and they own the copyright. What we're asking, again, is that the term funded, the term actually within what stipulates that amount of money or the amount of funding or the amount of support from the state into a work. Let's talk about the National Video Foundation. If they commission a work out there to go and be made, and the government has put money in through NFUF, and then they would own the rights and they would own the copyrights of that, and the author or the capturer then only has a limited royalty funding back to them. What we're saying here again is that the state or those commissioning bodies must state up front what is the percentage, if not just from an international or from a governmental structure, what percentage of funds from the outside is going into the production, because that would help the creator understand the future copyright of that work and the royalties due to them into the future. If not, the government is saying that all work funded by them, by a small percentage or a large percentage, they would own the rights. And again, the copyright holder, the individual who's producing it and presenting it, would be negated the future royalties on that work. The third point of contention was the actual contracts. To ensure the contracts to be within a specific era or specific time where the creator and the commissioner has a legal binding contract on the length of work, as in the longevity on the royalties of what is due to the creator or the photographer, and the length of time between, as Tatu has already explained, the royalties due to that individual into the life of the work or the life of the individual who has captured the work. Those are the main 3 points that under SAFREA that we would like to contest within there, or ask the government bodies to look into, because of these points at the moment are detrimental to the members, not only within the creative or the whole of the creative body of the freelancers and the creative industry out there as we see it. Thank you.
Thank you.